YouTube fam. Thank you for joining me today here on Talking Crime. My name is Gina Marie Bova, and this is where I like to come to discuss solved and unsolved true crime cases, true crime facts and statistics, and missing person cases that I don't feel have gotten enough attention from mainstream media. If you're interested in everything true crime like I am, then I do hope that you will choose to subscribe to this channel. And if you click the little bell next to the subscribe button, YouTube will notify you whenever I upload new content. Quick warning before we get started. My videos are intended for mature audiences only, not for children or those with weak stomachs. My language is not censored. I give details and show photos at my discretion, and these are stories about true cases and have pictures of real crime scenes. And I know that I talk about very triggering subject matter to some viewers, so please, viewers, beware. These stories are hard to hear. I know because they're just as hard to tell. But I choose to tell them anyway because I am tired of the bad guys being treated more like movie stars while the victims are all but forgotten. Close to 80% of the guns used by the school shooters that were under the age of 18 were taken from either their own homes or from the homes of either relatives or friends. About 77% of students who become school shooters told somebody of their plans beforehand, like a friend, classmate, family member, whatever. But yeah, in 77% of these cases, somebody knew what was being planned and said nothing to anybody. Kids have become desensitized to violence and crime in general by being exposed to it pretty much everywhere they look. And so many of these kids think that violent shit is cool or even funny. The reality of the consequences and the aftermath, that's something that they're not exposed to until the shit gets real. But then the damage has already been done. From 2013 to 2019 in the United States alone, 347 shootings occurred on the grounds of kindergarten through 12th grade schools, which resulted in 129 deaths and 270 people being wounded. This year, 2022, so far, there have been 140 incidents of gunfire on school grounds, which have resulted in 46 deaths and 111 injuries. We all know that school shootings happen. The questions that we should be asking are why do they happen and what can be done to prevent them from happening. And I won't pretend to have all the answers. What I do know is that the shooters are generally not the popular kids in school. They're generally described as loners, weird, moody, angry, always to themselves, shy, etc., etc. And they tend to get bullied a lot, sometimes for years before they decide to get what they consider their revenge. Others feel like they just aren't noticed enough or acknowledged enough. And some idolize past shooters and envy the attention they got and how all the attention that was focused on them, they might think it was cool what they did, and they could understand the reasons behind it, and so it gets them focused on maybe they should do that too. Some decide that, yes, they're depressed and they want to just die. They don't want to go back to school. They don't want to do anything except for kill themselves. Well, instead of quietly committing suicide and dying alone, they plan on taking as many people as they can with them and going out in this blaze of glory, and then finally people would know their names and maybe even envy them now. So how do we prevent school shootings? There's no one magic cure. It's something that's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work in a lot of areas, and it's still not guaranteed to completely stop it, but the numbers are rising. Every year we're having more and more, and there's got to be something we could do to slow down this trend. My opinion is that gun reform will solve absolutely nothing. Responsible gun owners are not the ones that are going into schools and shooting them up. Stop, honey. However, I do think that responsible gun owners need to make sure that their weapons are safely secured at home, so these kids and teens are not having access to them to take them. And I don't want to hear how your kid would never hurt anyone, how your kid has been trained their entire lives on gun safety. Nobody wants to think that their kid is going to become a school shooter or hurt somebody. Nobody thinks that these situations are even going to happen to them or affect their lives in any way. And you might be right. Your kid might not ever take your weapon. Your kid might never hurt anybody. But does your kid ever have friends over? And you don't think they will either, right? Are you willing to bet your child's life on it? Because I sure don't want you betting my children's lives on it. Other ways to lessen the risk of having school shootings at your local schools are better security, better training for school employees, better anti-bullying tactics. So better anti-bullying tactics. Bullying in schools, it should never be tolerated. But teachers and staff, they can only do so much. Let's face it, kids are little assholes. They're going to do what they're going to do. Okay? It needs to start at home from a very early age. Parents teaching their children about what's right, what's wrong, how to be a decent human being. And having consequences if they are caught bullying other children. Having consequences to teach them that is not okay. Teachers and parents need to start working together more. There are too many absentee parents, and I know that there's busy schedules, lots of working and so forth, but time needs to be taken for the safety of your children. And we got to figure it out. That's all there is to it. Teachers and parents working together, teaching them not to bully, teaching them to help if they see somebody else being bullied, either by being nice to that person or by telling a teacher that this is happening. There are ways that they can help without, them jumping in and beating somebody's ass or something. You could also teach the ones that are being bullied healthy ways to deal with it. And it doesn't mean that they have to beat them up. There are other ways as well. If they're getting physically assaulted and nobody's stopping it, personally, I think they need to just lay that motherfucker out and it would stop. But that's just my opinion and how I was raised. And a lot of people just don't believe in violence, and that's okay too. There are other ways, maybe helping them to understand why they're being bullied. Why is this child so mean to you? Maybe it's because they're completely unhappy in their lives, and maybe something is going on with them and it's not actually you per se that bothers this person. Maybe they just have their own issues, and that doesn't excuse what they're doing to you, but maybe that would help with their self-esteem, the bullied one, to understand that it's not them. It's not because it's them, and teach them healthy ways to not get bullied, to remove themselves from situations, and how to react to situations. As far as security goes, it doesn't just mean more armed guards or arming teachers, but, to me, that's a good start. Security gates so that visitors can get buzzed in are great, but they do nothing to protect against armed students that don't have to get buzzed in. Security cameras, again, also very useful after the fact. We can look at the camera footage and see exactly what happened. During an incident, police can tap into that and be able to see what's happening from outside using the camera system. So that is useful, but it's not preventative. People balk at the idea of guard-monitored metal detectors at entry points at schools, and I just don't understand why. Maybe if you are one of these people, you can talk to me in the comments and help me understand. Because, they cost a lot of money, but the price is much higher when children are being killed, and especially when it could be avoided. We send millions and billions of dollars in aid money to foreign countries, which is great, but we need to use that money to take care of our own people here in this country first, and what's left over, then we can decide how to disperse it to help others. Maybe you think it's too prison-like or too traumatic for children to have to deal with at school. How traumatic do you think those the school shootings are for the children, the survivors at least. How traumatic is that? Walking through a metal detector and having somebody make sure that you are not armed before going in and being around all these other children. I don't see how that could be very traumatic, maybe time consuming, maybe a little annoying, but not traumatic. Getting them accustomed to metal detectors is preparing them for real life. I mean, they're used in airports, government buildings, courthouses across the country in order to protect public as well as employees in those buildings. And do you think that their lives are worth any more than the lives of our children and our educators? I don't. It's just some food for thought. If you disagree, that's good too. I love a good conversation. I will try to help you see things from my point of view, and I would hope that you will help me see things from your point of view. And that is the only way that we are going to come together as a nation and help rectify this issue and lower the risk of school shootings. Just some food for thought. Little story, 1927, Andrew Cahoe. Have you heard of him? I hadn't. But let me tell you this real quick because I found it quite interesting. Andrew Cahoe was a trained electrician, a farmer, and a local school board treasurer. He was also the deadliest school mass murderer in the history of this country. Not a single gun was used, and very few people even know his name. He and his wife, they had lived on their farm in Bath Township, Michigan. He was known to be a penny pincher, but people seemed to like him. He always was out there working in the community. People knew him. Everybody kind of knew everybody. It was a fairly small town, especially back then. For months, though, this year, 1927, it seemed to him that everything kept going wrong. One thing after another was just not going the way he wanted it to, and it made him angrier and angrier, more confrontational with the neighbors and other people that lived there, the community. He was depressed. The school district had moved all the students into this new school, citing convenience and a better learning environment, better education as reasons for the move. And Andrew was pissed off because it also meant higher taxes. And like I said, he's a penny pincher. He was not down with that, okay? He fought the move, but he lost. Then he accuses the school superintendent of mismanagement of funds, but it really did no good. So he's pissed about that. His wife gets very sick with tuberculosis. He also hoped to get elected for a township clerk, but he lost the election. Plus, he was facing foreclosure on his farm because he fell behind on mortgage payments. So the people that knew him were seeing a change in his entire demeanor. Over time, and only a couple months, but over time, it was getting worse and worse, okay? His anger was triggered more easily. He seemed depressed. He was neglecting his duties around his farm. And his friends and acquaintances were a little worried, and they would talk amongst themselves about, wondering if he was going to go ahead and kill himself because they thought he was headed in that direction. Unfortunately, that's not all he was thinking about doing. At some point, he hid explosives that he possessed that were left over from World War I, and I'm not sure how he had possession of these explosives. I couldn't figure that out, and I don't know that I really want to know, but he had a shit ton of explosives, okay? So he took some of them and he hid them in the school, a lot of them. He also stacked his truck full of them. This was all to be used later. So fast forward to May 18th, 1927. He wakes up, puts his plan into action, goes into the other room and he kills his wife. Then he goes outside and he kills his 2 horses. And then he uses dynamite to blow up his farmhouse. And then he hops into his truck and he heads toward the school. Now remember, his truck was filled with explosives, so he's a traveling bomb. Anyways, an alarm clock was a trigger that was wired to, is a detonator. It was wired to the explosives that were hidden inside the west wing of the school. And when the alarm clock went off at 9:45 that morning, the west wing blew up. And he was a half hour away, still heading in that direction. The school was in complete chaos. And there were bodies and body parts, blood everywhere, people screaming. The bomb going off was deafening, so it was a mass confusion. It was just mayhem. The adults that were able to were trying to help the injured and get the kids out of there. People in the community from the surrounding area, after the dust settled and they figured out what the hell just happened, they ran in to help as well. Andrew arrives at the school about 10:15, so it's about a half hour after the explosion went off, and he drove his explosive-filled truck up to the school and then detonated it. And in essence, he committed suicide, but at the same time, he killed and injured many, many more. Later, it was reported it could have been much worse. Later, 500 pounds of explosives were found hidden on the east wing of the school. Those didn't detonate because of a faulty wire. Otherwise, it would have been exponentially worse than it was. So a lot of people were lucky to have survived. But as it was, a quarter of the town's children were killed that morning. The numbers totaled 45 dead and 58 wounded, and he was one of the dead. Found later, he had placed a sign in a fence, and people found it later, and the sign read, "Criminals are made, not born." So the message I'm trying to give by telling the story, there's a couple. One is how media portrays these mass murders, mass shootings. Now, every time there's a shooting in a school, Columbine's brought up, Sandy Hook is brought up. I've never heard of this Andrew Cahill, ever. And this is the worst one in the history of this country. The most dead and injured. And he didn't use a gun. And that's why I believe he's not mentioned today. Because a lot of the times, these certain stations will use tragic events like a school shooting to try to further their agenda, which would be, gun control or changing the laws about guns, taking away the Second Amendment and so forth. It's not, and I say this a lot, but it's not the law-abiding citizens, the legal gun-carrying person that is doing the mass shootings and being the serial killers. It's the bad guys. And if we take the guns away from the good guys, then how do we protect ourselves from the bad guys? Of course, that's just my opinion. Another reason I'm telling this story is to show that if you don't have guns anymore, people will still find a way. The problem isn't the weapon. Weapons don't kill people. People kill people. And there are countries where guns are illegal and people don't own the guns. But yet there are still murders because they find a way. If they want to do it, they'll do it. The trick is trying to figure out why they want to do it and fixing that problem. And we're never going to fix it for everybody. We're never going to get rid of the problem of murder or crime. That's just ridiculous to even think that it's ever going to be a completely crime-free society. We're humans and we are faulty. We were made that way. Some worse than others. But these kids that are going in and shooting the schools up, there are reasons for that. So let's talk about that. Sadly, I could sit here all night and for many days talking about the kids that go into schools and kill other kids. These mass shootings have happened way too often. There have been so many of them, so many needless mass murders. One of the reasons that was stated earlier that these things happen is because they want to be noticed or famous. They want their name and faces on the news. I'm not going to help give them that. To me, their names don't matter. To me, the ones that should be remembered are the victims in these cases, and there are far too many of them. So instead of giving you a bunch of stories about the actual mass shootings, I'm just going to end this here by saying we as a nation need to do better. We need to be better parents, better human beings. We need to teach our children how to be better to one another, how to deal with their problems in, in a healthier way. We need to not have mental health be such a bad word. People need to understand that the majority of the citizens of this country could probably use some good mental health providers. There's a stigma that I don't understand against mental health help. We need to get over that. That's bullshit. We all need help in some way or another, and then we need to help our children. And if we can't, we need to find somebody that can. We need to work together to educate them starting from a young age. We're never going to completely cure this crime epidemic that we have got going on here in this country, but the numbers are increasing. It's getting worse every year. And rather than just sitting idly by and watching as children are getting slaughtered for no good reason, we should be working towards fixing this problem. If you have any opinions on this matter or disagree with me in any way on anything I said in this video, I would love it if you'd put it in the comment section and we could discuss it like grown-ass adults. And I would love to hear your opinions and have an educated conversation with one another. That would be great. I always answer all of my comments. I am going to be back here in a couple of days with another story. I do hope that you will join me then. Until then, don't forget to subscribe, maybe like the video, definitely shoot a comment, and y'all stay safe out there. I'll see you next time.